Welcome to my channel. And today, I want to share a story that will take you inside a world of wealth, power, and unexpected courage. It's about a young woman who stood up against injustice, a billionaire's fiancé whose secrets were about to be exposed, and how one brave voice changed everything in a grand estate filled with luxury and hidden truths. This story is full of drama, redemption, and lessons about integrity and courage. So let's start. The grand ballroom of the Naji estate shimmered with the soft glow of hundreds of crystal chandeliers, reflecting off the polished marble floors like rivers of liquid light. Every detail of the evening screamed wealth and opulence. Golden candelabras lined the walls, delicate silk drapes framed the tall windows, and the scent of rare orchids filled the air. Yet, amidst all this grandeur, an uneasy silence descended when Lady Victoria Namdi, the fiancée of the young billionaire Amechi Naji, raised her delicate hand and pointed sharply at a trembling waiter. Her eyes, icy and unforgiving, locked onto him like a predator, and everyone present. The caterers, servers, security guards, and even the event coordinator froze in anticipation. None dared breathe. Victoria's reputation preceded her. She was beautiful, poised, and endlessly charming in public. But those who worked under her shadow knew a different truth. She was ruthless, manipulative, and cruel. Tonight, she was furious, and someone would suffer. Yet before she could hurl her words of condemnation, a calm, unwavering voice cut through the tension. "Please, ma'am, allow me to explain," said the new event assistant, Inozi Udo, her voice soft but firm, carrying a weight of dignity that belied her 3 days' experience at the estate. She was a quiet girl from a small town, sent to the city to earn money for her younger siblings' education. Nobody expected her to challenge Lady Victoria, let alone do so in front of 200 affluent guests. Yet here she was, standing her ground. Victoria's lips curled with surprise and fury. "What did you just say?" she hissed, her hand still raised. Inozi did not flinch. Her posture remained straight, her gaze respectful yet unwavering, and her voice calm. Unbeknownst to everyone in the ballroom, Amechi Naji, the young billionaire himself, had just stepped in from the balcony after taking a phone call. He paused, sensing the tension, and his eyes fell upon the scene. His fiancée, poised and dangerous in appearance, was about to humiliate a servant, and a young woman was daring to oppose her. Amechi's chest tightened, and for the first time in many months, doubt stirred within him. Victoria's words finally fell into the room, sharp and cutting. "You're fired. Pack your things immediately!" But Inozi's voice did not waver. "Ma, please let me explain what truly happened," she said, her tone steady, gentle, and unafraid. The room held its collective breath. Then came a sound that would forever mark the night, the desperate, cracking voice of the waiter, collapsing to his knees. "Please, Ma, don't do this! My daughter is in the hospital. I need this job!" His tears streaked down his face, raw and unashamed. Gasps rippled through the guests as they absorbed the scene. Amechi, standing silently on the balcony, whispered under his breath, "What kind of woman am I planning to marry?" The story that unfolded in that moment, the confrontation, the desperation, and the courage, had roots that stretched back weeks before, long before Inozi ever stepped into the Naji estate. 4 weeks earlier, Amechi Naji, owner of the prestigious Naji luxury hotels, was well known in Lagos and across Nigeria for his generosity and support of local businesses. People admired his ethics, his humility, and his vision. But his fiancée, Victoria, was a different tale. Stunning, educated, and influential, she was feared by the staff who worked under her. To them, she was unpredictable and cruel, insulting workers, threatening livelihoods, and firing without cause, all while maintaining a charming, polished facade in public. Inozi's arrival at the estate was unremarkable at first. The head of events introduced her simply, "This is our new assistant. Please help her learn quickly." The other staff exchanged wary glances. "Another one? She won't survive. Victoria will crush her like the others," they whispered. But Inozi's demeanor immediately earned respect. Calm, polite, and diligent, she carried herself with quiet confidence, Her mission was simple: work hard, support her family, and maintain her dignity. For 3 days, she avoided conflict, learning the ropes, observing Victoria's tyranny from the shadows. But the 4th day marked a turning point. It began with a small incident. Victoria's designer handbag had gone missing. She accused the staff loudly and recklessly, sending employees scurrying like frightened birds. She stormed into the hall, shouting, shoving, and cursing until her eyes landed on Inozi. "You, new girl, come here!" Inozi stepped forward, calm. "Did you see my bag?" Victoria demanded, her face twisted with rage. "No, Ma," Inozi replied softly. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. Victoria's hand shot out to strike her, but Inozi caught it with a gentle, firm grip. The room froze. Shock rippled through the staff, and even Victoria faltered, embarrassed and enraged. Then, from the balcony entrance, a voice rang out, carrying authority and wisdom. "So this is the woman you chose." The room turned. Standing there was Mama Chinenye, the woman who had raised Amechi after his mother's passing, her cane in hand, eyes sharp and penetrating. Everyone knew that her opinion held weight with Amechi, because she spoke the truth with love, no matter how difficult. Victoria's face paled. Her hand was still caught in Inozi's grip, and she could only stare as Mama Chinenye's gaze swept over her. "So this is who you have become," she said, her voice calm yet resonating like thunder. The staff bowed their heads, whispering prayers of relief and awe. Victoria tried to regain control, pointing at Inozi, but Mama Chinenye shook her head. "I saw everything, and so did he," she said, tilting her head toward Amici. Amechi's eyes were distant, unreadable, as he observed the fiancée he thought he knew. Mama Chinenye continued, her words piercing. "You told me you respected people. You told me you were ready to be a wife. Yet here you are, cursing and shaming workers in front of your future husband." Victoria stammered, her voice softening, but Mama Chinenye silenced her with a raised hand. "Improving by hurting others?" she asked quietly. At that moment, the tension in the room was shattered by Victoria's phone ringing. Mama Chinenye calmly answered it, and a deep, cold male voice reverberated across the hall. "Is this Victoria Namdi? Justice has finally found you." The line went dead. Everyone froze. Victoria's face turned white. Amechi stepped forward, his jaw tight. The confrontation had only just begun. The room held its breath as Victoria trembled, clutching the edge of the marble table, her knuckles white. The voice on the phone, the ghost of her past finally confronting her, had shaken even her composure-honed confidence. Amechi's gaze was unwavering, his chest rising and falling steadily, as though he were measuring every heartbeat, every lie, every truth. Inozi stepped back respectfully, hands folded, observing the way courage could ripple through fear, turning it into justice. The staff whispered among themselves, glancing at one another in awe. No one had ever seen Victoria falter like this. Mama Chinenye's eyes softened as she addressed Victoria, her voice steady but imbued with undeniable authority. "Child, whatever you have hidden will weigh on you until it is faced. Speak the truth now before more damage is done." Victoria's lips quivered. Tears streamed down her face. "If I tell him, he will leave me," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Amechi's jaw tightened. "If you do not tell me, I will leave anyway," he said calmly. But the weight behind his words pressed into the room like a physical force. Victoria's shoulders shook as she dropped to her knees. The crystal chandeliers overhead glinted like distant stars, but the light could not reach the darkness she had carried for years. 3 years ago, she whispered. "Before I met you, I worked at a hotel in Port Harcourt. There was a man, the manager. He trusted me with the company funds. I stole from him. 10 million naira. I disappeared." Gasps echoed through the room. Even the staff, who had endured her cruelty daily, were stunned. Amechi's eyes widened, disbelief etching across his handsome features. "You... what?" he asked, his voice tight. Victoria buried her face in her hands. "I was desperate," she admitted, her words cracking. "I thought I could get away with it. I wanted to secure my future first." Mama Chinenye shook her head slowly, disappointment etched across her wrinkled face. "And the man?" she asked gently. "His family suffered," Victoria admitted between sobs. He lost his job. My actions destroyed his life. Amechi stepped back, his world spinning. The life he had imagined, the love, the partnership, the promise of shared dreams, was collapsing in real time. Victoria crawled toward him, reaching out with trembling hands. "Ama, please," she begged. "I was going to pay him back. I swear I was." But Amechi's eyes hardened, reflecting both sorrow and resolve. "When? After we were married? After you had access to everything I own?" His voice was steady, cutting through her desperation. The truth had become undeniable. Before Victoria could respond, the grand doors of the estate burst open. A tall man, his suit faded, his face marked by years of pain and struggle, strode in with purpose. Security attempted to stop him, but he pushed forward with quiet authority. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Where is Victoria Nanamdi?" Victoria screamed, backing away. The man's eyes locked onto her, and recognition flashed across his face. "So, you do remember me," he said, voice trembling with emotion. Amechi stepped protectively in front of Victoria. "Who are you?" he asked firmly. "My name is Chukwudi Obi," the man said, his voice breaking with grief. "She destroyed my life." The staff murmured in shock, exchanging glances. Mama Chinenye placed a gentle hand on Amechi's shoulder. Chukwudi's voice continued, shaking with pain. "I trusted her. I gave her responsibility and she stole everything. I was fired. My wife left me. My children dropped out of school. She ruined everything." Victoria's tears fell like a torrential rain. "I'm sorry! I'm so sorry!" she cried. But Chukwudi shook his head. "Sorry doesn't bring back 3 years of suffering," he said. Amechi's eyes narrowed, measuring the weight of justice against the pain inflicted. He turned to Victoria, voice firm. "How much did you take from him?" Victoria whispered, trembling. 10 million naira. Amechi nodded slowly, then turned to Victoria again, his tone sharp. "Did you spend it all?" She shook her head. I still have some." Amechi's eyes hardened. "How much?" Victoria hesitated, then admitted. 4 million? The room went silent. Amechi drew a deep breath, then said something that stunned everyone. "I will pay him the full amount!" Victoria gasped, her hands clasped over her mouth. "But not for you," Amechi added, his voice cold. "For him, because he deserves justice." Chukwudi's eyes filled with tears, gratitude and disbelief mingling. Amechi placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Take the money. Rebuild your life," he said simply. Chukwudi broke down, the weight of 3 years of injustice finally lifting. The staff wiped their eyes. Even Inozi felt the sting of emotion, amazed at how courage and truth had reshaped the fate of everyone in the room. Then Amechi turned to Victoria, his next words final, leaving no room for negotiation. "Victoria, I am ending this engagement." Her sobs echoed through the marble hall. "No, Amechi, please!" she pleaded. He shook his head, voice unwavering. "You lied to me. You hurt an innocent man. You treated my workers like trash. I cannot marry someone like that." Victoria clutched his legs, desperation raw in her every movement. "I'll change. I promise I'll change." Amechi gently removed her hands, his eyes firm. "You should have changed before you hurt people." Mama Chinenye knelt beside Victoria, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Child," she said softly, "change is still possible, but first, you must face what you have done." Victoria nodded through tears, the weight of accountability pressing upon her. Amechi immediately called his lawyer. Within the hour, Victoria signed documents agreeing to repay the remaining 6 million naira in installments. Chukwudi thanked Amechi repeatedly, his dignity restored, and for the first time in years, he felt hope. A heavy silence filled the ballroom as Victoria was escorted out. She looked back once at Amechi, whispering, "I really did love you." Amechi nodded, sad but resolute. "And I wish you had shown that love through honesty, not deception." Mama Chinenye sighed deeply. "You did the right thing, my son," she said. Amechi smiled tiredly, a mixture of relief and weariness. "I only did what was just," he replied, He then turned his gaze toward Inozi, the young woman who had sparked the entire chain of events. She had stood firm when others trembled. She had stopped cruelty, not with force, but with courage and dignity. "Noi," he said softly, approaching her. "You changed everything today." Inozi shook her head. "No, sir. I only did what felt right," she replied humbly. Amechi smiled warmly. "That," he said, "is why you made a difference." The estate felt lighter that evening. The workers whispered quietly to one another, relief washing over them. For the first time, the halls were free of fear, replaced with respect, hope, and the calm certainty that truth had prevailed. Over the following days, Chukwudi used the money to restart his life, reconnect with his children, and rebuild his dignity. Victoria began attending counseling, her journey toward genuine change only just beginning. Mama Chinenye prayed quietly for everyone, grateful that justice and compassion had triumphed. One evening, Amechi stood on the balcony, the cool Lagos breeze carrying the scent of the sea. Inozi passed by, carrying supplies for the next event. He stopped her gently. "You know," he said softly, "you remind me of something my late mother used to say." She blinked. "What, sir?" he asked, smiling faintly. "A good person is not the one who has power, but the one who uses their voice to protect those who have none." Inozi blushed, looking down shyly. Amechi nodded. "You helped me see the truth today. Because of you, justice was served." The wind carried a soft rustle through the estate. Amechi's final words lingered in the evening air. "Thank you, Noi. You made a difference just by being brave." Inozi smiled softly, honest and quiet, the kind of smile that carried the weight of a soul untouched by fear. For the first time, everything felt right. Everything had been set in motion by courage, by truth, by the simple act of standing firm. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, the estate felt alive, peaceful, and finally free. Justice, honesty, and hope had found their place once again. Weeks before the infamous ballroom incident, the Naji estate had always exuded perfection, at least on the surface. The sprawling property, perched on a hill overlooking the Lagos Lagoon, was a testament to Amechi Naji's success, a mix of modern luxury and traditional African elegance. Hand-carved mahogany pillars lined the grand hall, while vibrant Kente-inspired tapestries decorated the walls. Gardens, bursting with hibiscus, bougainvillea, and frangipani, added a burst of color and fragrance. But within this beauty and wealth, a hidden hierarchy thrived, one that dictated fear, obedience, and silent endurance. Inozi Udo, a young woman of quiet strength, had arrived at the estate with nothing but a suitcase, determination, and letters of recommendation that praised her diligence and honesty. Her village in Enugu State was far behind her, where her parents tilled small plots of land and her younger siblings relied on her for school fees. She had always been taught that a person's dignity was priceless, that truth and respect must never be compromised, even when the world seemed ready to crush you. These principles guided her every action at the estate, quietly at first, until the moment of confrontation when her courage became visible to all. Victoria Namdi, in stark contrast, had grown up surrounded by privilege but hardened by entitlement. Her father, a wealthy businessman from Port Harcourt, had taught her that power was to be wielded ruthlessly, that appearances mattered more than integrity. From a young age, she had learned manipulation as a survival skill, perfecting charm in public and cruelty in private. She thrived on control, on being feared, and on ensuring everyone knew their place beneath her. When she met Amechi, she had seen a kingdom ripe for the taking. A man admired and respected, yet young enough to mold into her vision of the perfect partner. Amechi Naji himself was a different breed of leader. His youth belied the sharpness of his mind, his generosity paired with a strong sense of justice. He had built the Naji Luxury Hotels empire from scratch, a series of boutique hotels and resorts across Nigeria that supported local artisans and employed thousands. To him, wealth was not just about accumulation, it was about responsibility, about lifting others as he rose. And yet, in matters of the heart, he had been blinded by Victoria's charm, mistaking beauty and grace for character. Life at the estate, was regimented. Staff moved silently, anticipating the slightest change in Victoria's mood. Even the seasoned heads of departments knew to tread carefully, their experience failing to shield them from sudden verbal assaults or unfair dismissals. Yet, Inosi's presence introduced a subtle disruption to this rhythm. Her calm confidence, her refusal to bend under intimidation, became a quiet rebellion that neither Victoria nor the staff had expected. The day Victoria lost her composure over the missing handbag had been ordinary at first. But it became extraordinary because of the unseen forces at play. Inosi's unshakable poise, the cumulative frustration of the staff, and the quiet observation of Amechi from the balcony. Inosi's intervention had been a simple act of humanity, yet it carried weight powerful enough to challenge the unchallenged. In the weeks following the confrontation, the ripple effects of that night reshaped the estate's environment. Workers who had previously endured humiliation in silence began to stand taller. Even small gestures, offering suggestions, asking questions, or simply completing tasks with pride, became acts of courage. Amechi, now fully aware of the true nature of his fiancée, became a more present leader, walking among the staff, engaging with their lives, and ensuring that respect and dignity were central to every decision. Meanwhile, Inosi's reputation grew quietly but steadily. She had not sought attention, yet her courage and integrity inspired admiration. From cooking assistants to seasoned event coordinators, everyone recognized her quiet power. Her humility, paired with her strong sense of justice, made her a natural leader, one who could influence without dominating, one who spoke truth without arrogance. Victoria, on the other hand, retreated into a private world of shame and reflection. The repayment of the stolen funds and her removal from Amechi's life forced her to confront years of learned behavior, entitlement, and cruelty. For the first time, she faced accountability not just in theory, but in tangible consequences. Counseling sessions became her daily ritual, a slow and painful process of untangling the habits that had led her to this downfall. Through it all, Mama Chinenye remained a guiding presence. Her wisdom, a blend of traditional African values and modern sensibilities, provided balance to Amechi's decisions. She reminded him that leadership was not only about enforcing justice, but also about nurturing growth and compassion. Her gentle voice carried authority without fear, and her interventions often diffused situations before they escalated. The estate itself began to reflect the changes in human dynamics. The gardens, once pristine but sterile, now buzzed with life. Children of staff running across the lawns, laughter mingling with the soft hum of evening cicadas, chefs experimenting with local ingredients, artisans showcasing handcrafted decor that celebrated Nigerian culture. Even the grand ballroom, once a stage for intimidation and fear, became a place for celebration, community, and shared victories. Amechi often reflected on the events that had unfolded, understanding that the confrontation with Victoria and the courage of Inosi had not merely resolved a single incident. They had transformed the estate's culture. Power without accountability had been challenged. Fear had been replaced with respect, and hope had taken root where despair once lingered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the estate, Amechi walked with Inosi through the gardens. The breeze carried the scent of frangipani and the distant sound of Lagos life beyond the estate walls. "You know," he said softly, "it takes a rare kind of courage to stand up for what is right when no one else will. You reminded me of something my late mother used to say." Inosi smiled shyly. "What's that, sir?" "A good person," he said, "is not the one who has power, but the one who uses their voice to protect those who cannot speak for themselves." Inosi's eyes glimmered in the fading light, her heart swelling with quiet pride. The events of that night, the confrontation, the repayment, and the change in estate culture had set a precedent. It reminded everyone that integrity and courage were worth more than fear and oppression. And for Amechi, it was a lesson in love, leadership, and the enduring power of truth. In the days following the confrontation, Victoria Namdi found herself trapped in a world she had never known, one without the armor of charm, fear, or manipulation. The lavish rooms of her temporary quarters at the estate, once her playground of influence, now felt like a prison. She wandered the halls aimlessly, her heels clicking softly against the polished floors, the silence around her louder than any insult she had ever hurled. For the first time, she could hear the echoes of her past, every lie, every cruelty, every betrayal, resonating like a chorus she could not escape. Counseling became her daily ritual, a process as uncomfortable as it was necessary. She met with seasoned therapists, some from Lagos and others from across Nigeria, who specialized in behavioral rehabilitation and accountability. They did not coddle her, they did not allow excuses. Instead, they guided her through memory after memory, forcing her to confront each act of selfishness, greed, and cruelty with unwavering honesty. Slowly, painfully, she began to see the consequences of her actions, not in abstract terms, but in the faces of the people she had hurt. Meanwhile, the Naji estate itself thrived under a new rhythm. Amechi had taken deliberate steps to ensure that respect and fairness became the foundation of every interaction. Staff meetings now encouraged open dialogue. The youngest kitchen assistants and gardeners could voice concerns without fear. Security personnel received training not only in protection, but also in human respect and conflict resolution. The event halls that once echoed with tension now resonated with laughter, discussion, and the occasional song from visiting performers. Amechi's touch was subtle but transformative, and the staff's morale reflected it. Inozi Udo, the young assistant whose quiet courage had sparked all these changes, continued to navigate her role with humility and grace. She oversaw event preparations with meticulous care, mentoring newer staff members and mediating disputes with a wisdom beyond her years. She became the anchor for many at the estate, a symbol that courage and fairness could indeed influence power. Yet, despite her growing recognition, she remained modest, insisting that her actions were simply what any conscientious person would do. One afternoon, Amechi invited Inozi to walk with him through the estate's expansive grounds. The gardens were in full bloom, with hibiscus, frangipani, and bougainvillea mingling with fruit trees that bore the sweetness of summer. The soft rustle of leaves and distant bird calls created a peaceful rhythm. Amechi paused by a small fountain, its waters dancing under the African sun. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "your actions reminded me that justice is not always about power, but about integrity, and integrity inspires those around us." Inozi's cheeks flushed with a mixture of pride and humility. "I only did what felt right, sir," she replied softly. Amechi nodded, his eyes thoughtful. Back in the mansion, Victoria's transformation was slower, fraught with resistance and self-doubt. She struggled to reconcile the woman she had been with the person she wanted to become. Journals lined her room, filled with reflections, apologies, and strategies for restitution. She visited Chukwudi Obi, the man whose life she had upended, delivering the remaining installments of repayment and offering formal apologies. Though the wounds of the past could not be erased, her efforts marked the first step toward genuine redemption. Cultural traditions of respect, community, and mentorship became more prominent at the estate. Amechi reinstated an annual festival to honor staff achievements, blending Yoruba drumming, Igbo dance, and epic culinary showcases. The estate halls filled with vibrant color, music, and storytelling. Young apprentices learned traditional crafts from master artisans, and staff families were invited to share in the celebration. This return to cultural roots reinforced Amechi's vision. Wealth was meaningless without the upliftment of community. One evening, as the sun set over the Lagos skyline, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Victoria stood by her balcony, reflecting on the events that had reshaped her life. The sound of children playing in the garden below, of staff exchanging laughter, of drums and songs in the distance, reached her ears and touched something deep inside. Change was difficult. Redemption was arduous. But she understood that facing her past was the only way forward. Meanwhile, Inozi continued to serve as the bridge between leadership and staff, embodying courage, wisdom, and compassion. She remained humble, quietly guiding those around her. Yet her influence was unmistakable. The workers whispered stories of her bravery, teaching newcomers that one voice could indeed spark a transformation. Amechi observed all of this with quiet satisfaction. His heart, once clouded by doubt and disillusionment, now carried a profound sense of clarity. The estate had become more than a symbol of wealth. It was a living, breathing community where respect, justice, and human dignity prevailed. As the months passed, Victoria's progress became evident, though the shadow of her past lingered. She volunteered at local initiatives, supported educational programs for underprivileged children, and worked alongside counselors to understand and correct her destructive behaviors. Her transformation was not complete, but the steps she had taken were real, deliberate, and sincere. Amechi often walked the estate grounds alone, observing the harmony he had helped nurture. At times, he would pause to watch Inozi instruct younger staff, or to see Victoria engaged in community work. Each sight reinforced his belief that true leadership, integrity, and courage could reshape not just individuals, but entire environments. And through it all, Mama Chinenye remained a steady presence, offering wisdom, patience, and guidance to everyone involved. Her voice, calm and unwavering, reminded the estate that justice and mercy could coexist. She taught that facing the truth, no matter how painful, was the first step toward lasting transformation. That evening, as the wind carried the scent of blooming frangipani, and the sky faded to deep indigo, Amechi stood silently, reflecting on the lessons of courage, justice, and redemption. Inozi approached, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Sir," she said softly, "you have created a place where people can rise above fear, where dignity matters more than wealth. You have changed everything, not through force, but through example." Amechi smiled, a quiet, thoughtful expression. "And you reminded me that one voice, spoken with truth and courage, can ignite change that power alone cannot achieve." The estate was alive with life, culture, and hope. Children laughed, staff worked with renewed pride, and the gardens thrived under careful hands. The grand halls, once dominated by fear and intimidation, now resonated with laughter, music, and respect. For the first time in many years, the Naji estate felt like home. Not just for its owner, but for everyone who walked its paths. As the weeks unfolded, the Naji estate became a place where life, culture, and accountability intertwined seamlessly. Victoria Namdi, once the embodiment of fear and manipulation, spent her days immersed in reflection and service. She walked the estate corridors slowly, pausing to speak with staff she had wronged in the past. Every apology she offered, every explanation she shared, was a thread in the long process of mending trust. While some employees remained wary, others began to see the genuine effort behind her actions, a willingness to confront her own faults that had previously been absent. Victoria's journey was deeply personal. Counseling sessions revealed layers of entitlement and fear she had never acknowledged, showing her that her cruelty had often been a shield against vulnerability. She began to journal every day, writing letters she never intended to send, imagining conversations with those she had hurt, and mapping out ways to repair the damage. She visited schools and community centers, offering her support to education initiatives, understanding that real redemption required action, not just regret. Slowly, painfully, she began to see herself differently, not as a powerful woman demanding obedience, but as a human being capable of change. Meanwhile, Inozi Udo continued to shine as the heart of the estate. Her influence had grown organically. Workers sought her guidance, knowing that her advice was rooted in fairness and respect. She coordinated events with precision, ensuring that every detail reflected the estate's commitment to excellence while honoring Nigerian culture. From arranging traditional dances for staff celebrations to sourcing locally made crafts for decor, she blended professionalism with cultural pride, elevating the estate's reputation without ever seeking the spotlight. Amechi observed these transformations with quiet satisfaction. His perspective on leadership had shifted profoundly. Wealth, he realized, was meaningless without responsibility, and authority without compassion was destructive. He spent long hours walking the estate grounds, speaking with staff one-on-one, listening to their hopes, challenges, and ideas. He encouraged apprentices to learn from artisans, gardeners to experiment with native plants, and young event assistants to develop leadership skills. Through these interactions, he not only strengthened the community within the estate, but also deepened his own understanding of what it meant to lead with integrity. One evening, the estate hosted a cultural festival that reflected the diversity of Nigeria. Musicians played the udu and talking drum, children performed traditional dances, and staff families were invited to share in the festivities. Amechi watched as Victoria, dressed modestly yet elegantly, interacted with artisans she had previously dismissed. She listened, asked questions, and offered support. Inozi coordinated the flow of events, ensuring that every performance, every display of craft, was showcased with dignity. The ballroom, once a symbol of fear, now hummed with joy, laughter, and applause. During a quiet moment, Amechi found Victoria standing alone in the garden, gazing at the hibiscus blooms in the fading sunlight. "Victoria," he said softly, "you've made progress, but change is ongoing. Redemption is not a destination, it is a path you must walk every day." Victoria nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I understand, Amma. I have so much to repair, but I want to do it. I must do it." Amechi smiled faintly, a mixture of hope and caution in his expression. He knew her journey was far from over, yet he also recognized the sincerity in her words. As the festival continued, the estate seemed to pulse with life. Children laughed as they chased each other through the garden paths. The aroma of roasted yam and jollof rice filled the air, and artisans displayed intricate beadwork and carvings that told stories of heritage and resilience. Staff, once silenced by fear, now moved confidently, their interactions marked by mutual respect. Even the older event coordinators, who had witnessed decades of hierarchy and intimidation, found themselves inspired by the new culture of fairness. Inozi, observing quietly from the edge of the celebration, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her role, once small and unassuming, had become a catalyst for transformation. She understood that courage was not always loud or grand. It often took the form of steadfast integrity, spoken at the right moment, in defense of what was just. She caught Amechi's glance and offered a shy smile. He nodded, silently acknowledging her part in the profound changes that had swept through the estate. Victoria's nights were now filled with reflection and learning. She attended workshops on emotional intelligence, read extensively on leadership and ethics, and spent time with the community, assisting those in need. The estate staff gradually witnessed her evolution, not through words, but through deeds. She mediated conflicts without aggression, provided support without expectation, and listened without judgment. Her previous self, the woman defined by power, fear, and manipulation, was slowly being replaced by a person capable of empathy, accountability, and grace. Amechi, walking through the estate one evening, paused by the fountain that glimmered under the setting sun. He thought of the night when Inozi had spoken up, the courage that had sparked justice, and the lessons that had reshaped everyone's lives. He understood that leadership was not simply about commanding respect, it was about cultivating it through fairness, compassion, and action. The estate was no longer just a symbol of wealth, it was a living, breathing community shaped by integrity, culture, and the bravery of one young assistant who refused to remain silent. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the gardens, Amechi looked toward Inozi and Victoria. He saw hope, growth, and the enduring power of truth. Inozi had proven that courage could transform fear into justice. Victoria was learning that redemption required consistent effort and humility, and he, as the steward of the estate and the community, had learned that true leadership demanded more than wealth. It demanded heart, wisdom, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right. The estate, alive with music, laughter, and the vibrant pulse of Nigerian culture, reflected the changes within its walls. The grand halls, once filled with fear, now resonated with life. The gardens, once orderly but lifeless, now blossomed with vitality. And the people, once silenced by intimidation, now stood taller, moving with pride, dignity, and a renewed sense of purpose. The Naji estate, bathed in the golden light of a West African morning, felt alive in a way it never had before. Birds chirped above the gardens, the hibiscus and frangipani swaying gently in the warm breeze. For the first time in years, the estate radiated not just wealth, but life, integrity, and hope. The echoes of fear that had once haunted its grand halls were gone, replaced with laughter, music, and quiet conversations filled with respect. Victoria Namdi, now more humble and self-aware, walked through the corridors with deliberate care. Gone were the sharp gestures, the piercing words, the sense of entitlement. Each interaction was measured, sincere, and guided by the lessons of accountability she had painstakingly learned. She spent her mornings assisting in community initiatives connected to the estate, helping local schools, and mentoring young women who, like her, were navigating paths shaped by privilege, ambition, and sometimes poor choices. The repayment of the stolen funds to Chukwudi Obi had been completed, restoring not only justice, but a sense of dignity for the man whose life she had disrupted. Amechi Naji, standing on the balcony overlooking the estate's sprawling gardens, watched the staff and visitors with a quiet smile. He had come to understand that leadership was not only about wealth or power. It was about fostering a community rooted in respect, fairness, and courage. The night of the confrontation with Victoria and the bravery of Enosi had taught him that even in the most polished, perfect facades, truth and integrity could break through and reshape the world around them. He often walked through the gardens, stopping to speak with workers, gardeners, and artisans, listening to their stories, encouraging their growth, and celebrating their achievements. Enosi Udo, now a central figure in the estate's daily life, moved quietly among the staff, offering guidance, encouragement, and wisdom. She had become the moral compass of the estate, a living example of courage, humility, and fairness. Her actions reminded everyone that one voice, spoken with integrity, could spark change far beyond what anyone imagined. Whether assisting in events, mentoring new employees, or mediating conflicts, her influence was felt everywhere, not through authority, but through quiet, unwavering strength. One evening, Amechi invited Victoria and Enosi to walk with him through the gardens. The setting sun painted the sky in vibrant oranges and reds, reflecting in the still water of the fountain. "Victoria," he said gently, "your journey has been difficult, but I see that you are choosing a new path. Redemption is not a single act. It is the sum of your daily choices, and I believe you are on that path." Victoria's eyes glistened with tears, gratitude, and determination. "Thank you, Ama," she whispered. "I am learning. Every day I am learning." Amechi turned to Enosi, his expression softening. "And you, Noi," he said, using her familiar nickname. "You reminded all of us that courage is the seed of justice. You did not seek recognition, yet your voice changed the course of so many lives. Never forget that your integrity has power beyond measure." Enosi lowered her gaze, shy but proud. "I only did what was right," she said softly. The estate hummed with life as the night deepened. Music from a nearby celebration blended with the laughter of children, the soft chatter of families, and the rhythmic tapping of local artisans practicing their craft. The grand halls, once silent with fear, now rang with joy and community spirit. Gardens once carefully tended, but devoid of soul, now thrived with vitality and purpose. The Naji estate had become a sanctuary of hope, integrity, and African cultural pride. Victoria, walking beside Amechi and Enosi, felt a sense of clarity she had never experienced before. She had faced her past, confronted her mistakes, and now worked actively to build a future defined by honesty, empathy, and accountability. The staff, observing her sincerity, began to trust that her change was genuine. The estate itself seemed to breathe with renewal, reflecting the inner transformations of its people. Amechi paused by the fountain, watching the water ripple in the evening light. "Our actions," he said, speaking more to himself than anyone else, "define the legacy we leave. Courage, truth, and respect. They are stronger than fear, power, or wealth." Enosi nodded, understanding fully that her small act of bravery had ignited a ripple that reshaped an entire world. Victoria, standing quietly beside them, absorbed the words, knowing she had a lifetime to continue proving them true. Over the following months, the estate flourished in every sense. Cultural festivals celebrated Nigerian heritage, the staff's talents were recognized and nurtured, and community outreach programs extended the estate's influence beyond its walls. Victoria continued her path of redemption, balancing her newfound humility with action that made amends to those she had wronged. Emichi's leadership matured further, grounded not only in justice, but in empathy and vision. Inozi's quiet guidance ensured that the estate remained a place where courage, fairness, and integrity thrived. The final scene of the estate, under the African sun, portrayed a harmony born of justice, truth, and resilience. The grand halls now echoed with laughter instead of fear. Gardens glowed with life, reflecting the growth and renewal within the people who walked them. Families, staff, and leaders moved together in a rhythm of respect and shared purpose. And for Amechi, Victoria, and Inozi, the lessons of courage, accountability, and integrity had left an indelible mark, ensuring that the estate and the lives within it would never be the same again. As the sun set over Lagos, painting the horizon in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Amechi spoke a final line to Inozi, carrying both gratitude and acknowledgement. "Thank you, Noi. You made a difference simply by being brave." Inozi smiled softly, her heart filled with quiet pride. And for the first time in a long time, everyone at the Naji estate felt peace, justice, and hope. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. Remember, true courage isn't always loud. It's standing up for what is right, even when no one else does. Integrity, honesty, and compassion can change lives, just like they did in this story. If this tale inspired you or made you think about the power of one brave choice, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories filled with lessons, hope, and inspiration. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life. If you like this story, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share with your friends and family so you don't miss the next powerful story coming your way. Drop a heart in comment, like and subscribe my channel, and visit my channel for more interesting story videos.